Welcome to the future. It is 1995, and the people, businesses, and leaders are preparing for a bright new millennium. What? Huh? Oh. I have just been informed that 1995 is in fact the past. So, instead of a futuristic city, instead of a futuristic city, a sci-fi utopia, this will instead be alternative history, or speculative fiction, which I do believe still means that this qualifies for a Hugo Award. Something to keep in mind. At this time in Unaka City, people recognize several issues in town. Steadily rising rents and home prices as walkable neighborhoods become desirable again. Poor non-car transportation options, meaning that everyone needs to own a $5,000 to $20,000 item to function in society. Air quality is getting worse. This is in spite of improved industrial emissions. And in the background of every other issue is growing or continued inequality, particularly among racial and class lines. Finally, people are becoming concerned that sprawl might destroy the beautiful ecosystems found in the Appalachian mountains and valleys. In order to meet all of these challenges, a complete transformation and rethinking of how Unaka City works is going to be required. And the centerpiece of this transformation is the new Regional Express Rail, or RER. It is transformative and innovative in several ways. First, it acts as a 1.5-kilometer subway serving downtown, the hospital, the university, and the densest neighborhoods in Unaka City. But if that's all it did, it would be overkill and a waste. The genius of the system is that it also connects to the suburbs of Clinton and Hadestown, bringing rapid transit to the entire region. This combination of commuter rail and urban rapid transit is common throughout the world, but is non-existent in the United States. And Unaka City's adoption of this represents true innovation in American transit. In France, it is called the RER, or Réseau Express Régional. In Germany, it is the S-Bahn, or Stadtbahn. In Japan, it is called the Rapid Service. All of these represent similar services where trains run from suburbs or satellite towns to the central city and then serve multiple stops as a metro or rapid transit before coming out and running to another suburb. There are several differences between this and the previous commuter rail system that Unaka City had, and I'm not referring to the tunnel or new electric trains. I think contrasting the systems along three aspects will highlight how much of an improvement the RER is. Number one, access to destinations. This is either the largest or second largest difference between the old and the new. The old commuter system's downtown station was a 10-minute walk or more from the office towers and wasn't even trying to connect to anything else. The RER, meanwhile, has 2 underground stops serving the middle of downtown, plus direct access to the largest hospital complex and the largest mall in the region. That is a huge increase of destinations without factoring in any of the new development. Number 2 is frequency. This point is tied with the first in terms of importance. The old commuter service was pretty bare bones. 3 trains in the morning, 3 trains in the evening. It takes white-collar workers to their 9-to-5 jobs, and that's all. If that's not your schedule, then you're out of luck. The RER, meanwhile, has trains every 15 minutes, every day, from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. This means that all sorts of workers can rely on it, from security guards at the mall to the head pastor at Hadestown Baptist Church. Also, it's frequent enough that missing a train will only inconvenience someone, not ruin their whole day. Number 3 is connections. The old commuter rail had 2 transit connections, a single downtown circulator in Unaka City and 2 small-town infrequent bus lines in Hadestown. This meant that very few commuters used much transit. Most riders drove to the station, then hopped on the train. But every single RER station has at least 1 bus connection, and the reorganized bus terminal is across the street from one of the downtown stations. Also, transfers are free. All of this adds up to show that the RER is the inverse of commuter rail. Rather than bringing the suburbs to downtown, RER brings urban rail out. Elsewhere on the transportation front, we see more bus services. Previously, only Hadestown and Unaka City had buses, but as part of this RER upgrade, Clinton, Lilac Park, and Madison all added bus service, and importantly, coordinated payments. This meant that an RER ticket or pass also included 2 transfers for free, meaning that for $1 to $4, you can take a bus to the train, get on the train, and then take a bus to your final destination. This level of fare integration is rare in America, even in 2020. But these operational decisions meant that this RER is convenient, fast, and practical. Thus, ridership explodes and dwarfs the previous commuter service. Also, this leads to a higher fare box recovery ratio, basically how much a service pays for itself, meaning that after these upgrades, the RER is less of a subsidy to suburban office workers and more so a functioning urban service. Now that we have covered the infrastructure changes, let's look at how the land and development changed as well, starting with an overview of the stations themselves and then looking at the land around these stations. Here is a quick overview of all the stations. Pay attention to their location and their surroundings. Clinton Springs Mall, Downtown Clinton, West Unaka, UNCUC, Thompson Street, Broad Street, North Hill Boulevard, Rothstein Station, Madison Station, West Hadestown, and Central Hadestown. Unlike the old commuter system, these stations are surrounded by development, apartments, condos, stores, offices, and other destinations, rather than just parking lots. This development next to the RER stations is known as TOD, or Transit-Oriented Development. It's what people call the new, dense, walkable development that has been sprouting up next to light rail and other transit since the 90s or so. As an aside, I resent this term. All development is based on the transportation that serves it. We solve this with the streetcar suburbs, the railroad towns, and the highway suburbs of the past. The only reason we single out TOD is because we worship at the altar of Jesus Chrysler and don't think of any other options. Anyways, this TOD is significant for several reasons. First, more destination near transit means that more people use transit, leading to lower car usage. And to summarize a previous episode, car bad, everything else good. But beyond transit ridership, TOD leads to lower cost housing. This is for two reasons. First, more supply lessens the impact of high demand, thus the fundamental laws of economics mean that rents in these areas don't explode. Also, this TOD is built without parking lots or garages, and those parking structures contribute to higher rents, typically by $200 to $300 a month, according to a 2014 study. But without wasting space for cars, rents in these new apartments are that much cheaper. And as nice as the free market is, for many, the rent is too damn high. And as we'll cover towards the end of the video, there was a lot of politicking and deal-making as part of making the train and TOD happen. One of these deals was for expanding public housing, and so West Unaka and Rothstein stations have several hundred public units, nothing fancy, but well-built and conveniently located by transit. The activists and local politicians were also able to create some community investments. 2 new offices for the local business incubator, where the county works with business organizations to provide guidance and free office space for citizens who want to start a new business. Also, they created 2 locations for a grocery co-op. It is a membership store, kind of like a Costco or Sam's Club. Membership is free for those who live in public housing, and it focuses on local produce and low prices. It becomes a very popular place to shop for everyone who lives along the RER. So we can see that the RER is a massive success in all categories. It provides fast, convenient transportation for thousands of citizens and has impressive ridership. It has unlocked a virtuous cycle of transit guiding development, which means more transit riders. And local groups were able to create investments that better the community as a whole. But something this good wasn't easy, and many hands stirred the pot. At the political level, this was a tremendous accomplishment and involved the reworking of some important agencies. Previously, there were separate transit agencies in Unaka City and Hadestown, and then Watauga Rail was totally separate as well. 3 agencies, 3 tickets, 0 coordination. This was the first thing to change, as all transit was put under a new unified agency, the Unified Watauga Unaka Transit Agency. This bureaucratic process was mildly controversial, but ultimately passed in a way to be described in the extra episode. This meant that fares and planning could be coordinated, and, as expected, every town that joined this agency wanted to get the same commuter service as Hadestown had. At the same time, inner-city representatives wanted rapid transit for their denser neighborhoods, and the mayor was unhappy about subsidizing suburban commuters. So, a classic situation. And, under normal American transit planning, this would be an impossible situation. But, at the first stakeholder meeting, they identified all of these needs, and then The planners identified a solution, even one that was outside of their orthodoxy. Note, this is exactly the opposite of how the Watauga Rail was originally set up. The alderman of Hadestown wanted to get a train, and by God, he was going to get it. So, after the planners planned, they came back to the next stakeholder meeting with a plan. The RER, very similar to the one that we have been exploring all video. The stakeholders at the meeting agreed it was exactly what they had been looking for. Now it was time to sell the plan to the public, as this would need to be approved in a 1992 referendum. But they quickly discovered that a key voting bloc was neither consulted nor approved of the plan: the black community, which, at a quarter of the population and overrepresented among bus riders, should have been a central group in this plan. And then in the first poll conducted, well, the 70% against the new plan by black respondents and 65% against the new plan among current bus riders shocked the planners, though it really shouldn't have. But rather than ignoring their own data and moving forward regardless, the planners repeated their process, this time adding the needs of black leaders and neighborhoods to their work. And so a new plan was unveiled, with a new stop in West Unaka at one end of a black neighborhood, while the downtown tunnel was rerouted to run next to North Hill rather than the convention center. Also, an improvement and overhaul of Unaka City's bus network was promised. We will look at that next episode. These changes had a drastic effect on public support, and in the next poll, now only 30% of black respondents disapproved and 40% of existing bus riders disapproved. So, when 1992 came around, the referendum approving the plan and funding it was passed in a landslide 69%. For those of you at home who are wondering how I was able to craft such a masterful bit of politicking, well, I had some help. I took Nashville's 2017 transit referendum, and I did the opposite of what Nashville did. Thus, theirs was a horrific failure. Mine was a success. Construction started in the summer of 1993 and was finished by 1995. It was built so quickly because there wasn't actually much to build. There were some stations, and then the tunnel downtown and one flyover. The tunnel, which was the lion's share of the work, went smoothly, and some aggressive road closures and cut and cover for the stations meant that this was not only fast, but cheap. This was an area where I break from my contemporaries. Many engineers are scared of too much disruption and will use extensive phasing and complicated half-builds, only stitching things together at night. This drags many projects on for months. I think ripping off the Band-Aid is the way to go. Just close it for a short period of time and get it built as fast as possible. There's a viral GIF of Dutch highway crews using this to great effect and replacing a highway bridge in 48 hours. And similarly, after a month of road closures, the heavy construction was done and life on the surface could return to normal. Speaking of construction, the land use around the stations went a lot easier. There were 3 new zoning codes established, U1 through 3. These codes had no parking minimums, no setbacks, none of that, just fire code and other safety measures. U1 had no height limit, U2 had a height limit of 9 stories, and U3 5 stories. Then, circles with a 4th-mile radius were drawn around each station, and residents within the voting districts had to choose between one of the 3. Additionally, everything in the downtown loop was classified as U1. It was during this frenzy of elections that community groups organized and pushed for the expanded public housing, the grocery co-ops, and business incubators that we saw at some of the stations. In exchange for these, organizers and developers pushed the voters to approve higher densities than otherwise might have been voted for. And as the 90s economic boom continued, these high-density zones captured most population growth, as well as job growth. As the metro area added 80,000 people, they all moved to areas close to the RER, meaning that within a decade, a sprawling Sunbelt city with a small urban core became a very transit-oriented city, at least along the One Rail corridor. Now, moving forward, the goals are to expand the RER to a second line and make good on the promise to bus users while undoing the damage created in the past.